The morning Evelyn Hart fled her wedding, the sky looked far too bright for a day built on panic. Sunlight spilled over the churchyard like a blessing, but to her it felt like a spotlight trapping her in place. The satin dress she'd been forced into felt heavy on her shoulders, the lace collar too tight around her throat. Every step she took down the aisle felt wrong, as if the walls themselves whispered that she didn't belong there. The townspeople watched her with curious smiles, unaware that her heartbeat was thundering in her ears like a drum of warning. Her fourth engagement. Her fourth attempt at a future she'd never chosen. Evelyn had spent most of her life being told what she would become: a wife to a man she barely knew, a caretaker to a household she didn't want, a woman who must obey. She'd been raised by her uncle after her parents passed, and the man believed fear was the strongest form of discipline. He used it often. Every decision he made for her was final. Every no, she whispered, was ignored. And today's marriage had been his final decree, but her body had learned long ago how to recognize danger before her mind admitted it, and as she took another trembling step toward the altar, the danger screamed inside her. Her vision blurred. Her breath grew thin. And then she ran. Gasps filled the church as she burst through the doors, the skirt of her wedding dress gathering dust and thorns as she sprinted down the hill. She didn't look back. She couldn't. Looking back might have frozen her again. She'd lived her entire life frozen. Today, she chose motion. Evelyn didn't take a horse, nor provisions, nor even shoes suitable for the desert's rugged ground. She simply ran until the town vanished behind her and the open land swallowed her whole. The desert heat rose like a wall, but even that felt better than the stifling grip of a life chosen by someone else. Hours passed. Her breath came in painful bursts, her throat dry, her skin burning. The wind dragged dust along her arms, coating her pale dress with earth. She had no idea where she was going, only that farther was safer. She kept telling herself the same promise over and over. Just keep moving, Evelyn. Keep moving until the world feels wider than his shadow. But the desert was unforgiving. As the sun climbed overhead, she stumbled more than once. The heat shimmered around her, bending the horizon in strange, wavering lines. Fear was no longer driving her, exhaustion was. The edges of her vision began to sway, and the sky no longer looked bright but white, almost painfully so. Her steps slowed until she finally sank to her knees beside a patch of dry brush. Her whole body trembled. Dust clung to her lashes. Her breath seemed too heavy to lift. The loneliness of the desert pressed in on her, but it was still kinder than the life she had fled. If she collapsed here, at least she collapsed free. But someone was watching her, someone she hadn't heard. Approaching. A figure on horseback had been tracking the unusual sight of a woman in a torn wedding dress wandering the desert alone. Coda, a young Apache warrior, had set out early that morning to scout the land near his tribe's camp. When he spotted her stumbling, he slowed his horse to avoid frightening her, but it was already too late. She looked like a creature caught between running and falling. He dismounted quietly, keeping distance, raising his hands, palms open, showing no threat. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said in a calm, steady tone. Evelyn startled, her eyes widening with the same panic she had fled with. She tried to stand, but her legs betrayed her. She backed away on shaking palms, breaths coming too fast. Coda didn't take a single step toward her. His voice lowered even softer, warm as late afternoon sun. "I won't hurt you." She didn't believe anyone could promise such a thing. Not anymore. Still, something in his stillness made her hesitate. He didn't reach for her. He didn't command her. He simply watched with quiet concern, waiting for her to choose. "You're safe with me," he finally added. The words felt impossible. Yet in the emptiness of the desert, spoken with no force, no expectation, They felt like a rope thrown to someone drowning. For the first time all day, Evelyn didn't run. Evelyn sat in the dust, trembling, unsure whether she was more afraid of the stranger before her or the memories she'd been running from. The desert had taught her harsh lessons in the span of hours, but now this man, tall, steady, and impossibly calm, stood with the patience of someone who understood fear without needing it explained. Coda watched her with eyes the color of warm earth, deep and unhurried. He could see the exhaustion in her posture, the way she kept glancing over her shoulder as if expecting someone to appear behind her. Whoever she wasn't merely lost. She was escaping. And Coda knew enough about people to recognize that escape left marks invisible to everyone except those who listened. "I won't come closer unless you ask," he told her. The simplicity of the offer startled her. Most men did not ask. Most men did not wait. Evelyn's hands curled into her skirt, her breath shaking. Why are you here?" she whispered. "I was scouting," he answered. "Looking for tracks, signs of trouble, or someone who needs help." Her eyes flickered with disbelief. "You help strangers?" "When they look like they're dying of heat," he said, a faint note of humor beneath his voice. But he softened immediately. "Or when they look afraid." The word afraid made something in her chest tighten. She hated fear, hated that it lived under her skin the way some people lived in houses, hated that it showed on her face even when she fought to hide it. But this man's tone didn't carry judgment, only understanding. Coda slowly knelt at a distance, lowering himself to her level so he wouldn't tower over her. He moved with the kind of controlled grace that came from years of training, but he kept his hands open on his thighs, palms up, a warrior's way of saying he was not a threat. "You're far from any town," he said. "If you stay out here alone, the desert will take you." Evelyn swallowed. She knew he was right. The sun had nearly taken her already, but fear was a stubborn companion, and the idea of trusting someone, even someone as calm as this, felt like stepping off a cliff. "You don't know me," she murmured. "No," he agreed. "But you needed water." He nodded toward his horse's saddlebags. "I brought extra." Her lips were cracked. Her throat felt like sandpaper. Just hearing the word water made her dizzy. Still, she shook her head. "I can't go with you." "Then I'll bring the water here," he offered gently. "You can drink where you sit." He rose slowly, making sure she could see his movements, and walked back to his horse. Evelyn watched every step, her pulse loud in her ears. He retrieved a leather water skin and returned, again stopping a good distance away. He set the water carefully on a rock midway between them. "You can take it when you want," he said. "I will stay back." No pressure. No commands. No force. Her uncle had never offered her anything without a price attached. Yet this stranger gave freely, without even asking her name. Evelyn crawled forward cautiously, her hands shaking as she took the water skin. The first sip nearly made her cry, cool, life-restoring, easing the burning dryness that had hollowed her out. She drank more, slower, feeling her body release a tension she hadn't known she was holding. While she drank, Coda remained seated in silence. He did not stare. He did not hover. He simply existed near her like a mountain, present, steady, offering shelter without saying so. When she finally lowered the water skin, she whispered, "Why are you being kind to me?" Coda held her gaze with a gentle steadiness. "Because kindness is what people deserve when they're hurt." Her throat tightened. No one had ever phrased it so simply. He continued, "And because leaving you alone out here would be a death sentence. I couldn't walk away and pretend I didn't see." Evelyn drew her knees to her chest, the wedding dress ripping a little more at the hem. The wind teased the torn lace, lifting it in soft waves. It felt surreal, sitting in the dirt, wearing what should have been a bridal gown. across from a warrior who treated her like something fragile but not broken. "You don't have to tell me what happened," he said, reading her silence. "But if someone is hunting you, they won't reach you where I'm taking you." Her heart lurched. "Where?" "A safe place." She shook her head rapidly. "There's no such place." Coda's expression didn't waver. "There can be." She looked at him, really looked. At the strength in his posture, at the calm in his eyes, at the promise he carried in the way he breathed. "I protect my own," he said. "And if you choose to come with me, even for a little while, I will protect you too." Those words washed over her like shade and desert heat. No orders, no demands. Just a choice. A choice she never had before. Evelyn closed her eyes, breathing the dusty air slowly, and for the first time since she fled the church, she felt herself stop running. The journey to Coda's shelter began slowly, not because of the distance but because he refused to rush her. Evelyn's legs were weak, her dress torn, her nerves frayed like old fabric. Each step she took toward his horse felt like a decision she had to remake again and again. To trust, to move, to believe she was not walking into another trap. Coda sensed this without needing her to say a word. He guided his horse closer, then stopped well short of reaching her. "You ride," he said gently. "I'll walk beside you." Her eyes widened. "You're giving me your horse?" "It is stronger than you right now," he replied with a small shrug, as if it were the most obvious truth in the world. "And you need the rest." He held the reins loose, offering them rather than handing them over. She took them with hesitant fingers, surprised by how steady the animal behaved. The horse snorted softly, lowering its head as if greeting her in quiet acceptance. Evelyn touched its mane tentatively, finding comfort in its warmth. Once she was settled in the saddle, Coda began leading the horse across the open land, heading toward the distant line of red canyons. Evelyn felt the sway of the horse beneath her, the breeze shifting her tangled hair, the steady sound of Coda's footsteps crunching through the dirt. The desert no longer felt like a place that wanted to swallow her whole. Not with him beside her. Still, fear lingered. Every shadow looked like danger. Every gust of wind sounded like pursuit. And beneath those fears was the deeper one. What if Coda changed? What if his kindness had limits? What if she was simply exchanging one form of control for another? Coda seemed to sense the swirl of thoughts inside her. After a long stretch of silence, he said softly, "You don't have to be afraid of me." She looked down at him, walking steadily beside the horse. "Fear doesn't turn off," she whispered. "Not when it's lived inside you for years." Coda nodded, not offended, not impatient. "Then let me give it something to rest against," he said. "Not erase it, just ease it." Evelyn didn't know how to respond to that. No man had ever spoken of her emotions as something deserving care. Only as something inconvenient. By late afternoon, the world shifted from flat horizon to rising red rock walls. They entered a narrow canyon where sunlight filtered down in soft golden sheets. The air cooled, carrying the scent of sage and river clay. It was quiet here, a peaceful kind of quiet. Like the land itself, breathed slower. Evelyn's shoulders loosened without meaning to. Coda noticed. "This place is hidden," he said as he guided the horse around a natural rock bend. "The wind carries sound away. The walls protect us. No one comes here without knowing the path." She glanced around, her gaze absorbing the crimson cliffs and the natural shade they offered. "It's beautiful." He smiled faintly. "It is home for a while." They reached a small clearing beside a trickling stream, where a modest shelter of woven branches and hides stood beneath an overhanging rock ledge. A fire pit sat in the center, surrounded by stones worn smooth by years of use. Nearby, Bundles of herbs and dried meat hung from a rope strung between two stunted trees. It did not look like captivity. It looked like safety carved into the earth. Coda helped her down from the horse. He stepped back immediately after steadying her. No lingering touch. No assumption of closeness. Evelyn felt a strange mixture of relief and disappointment at his restraint. "You can sit by the stream," he said, nodding toward the water. "Wash the dust from your face. Drink as much as you need. What will you do?" she asked. Coda lifted the saddlebags from his horse and began sorting their contents. "Make a fire. Prepare food. And give you space." She hesitated. "Why are you helping me this much?" He paused, meeting her eyes. "Because someone should have helped you long before now." The words hit her like a blow she didn't expect. Tears pricked her eyes, startling her. She turned away quickly, crouching by the stream as if to hide them. The cool water soothed her skin, but couldn't wash away the swirl of emotions rising inside her. Gratitude, confusion, and a fragile sense of being seen. As she washed, Coda worked quietly behind her, gathering wood, arranging stones, grounding the space with the steady rhythm of his tasks. When the fire crackled to life, the canyon filled with warmth and the faint scent of pine. Later, he brought her a piece of cooked venison on a wooden plate. She accepted it with trembling hands. Her stomach ached with hunger she hadn't had the strength to feel earlier. "You can stay here as long as you wish," Coda said. "No one will find you." She stared into the flames. "I don't even know if I should stay." "You don't have to decide now." His voice was low, calm. "Just breathe, rest, heal." For the first time in years, Evelyn took a breath that didn't feel borrowed from fear and let it out slowly. Watching the fire dance, she wasn't safe yet, but she was safer than she had ever been. And for the first time, she wondered what life might feel like when she wasn't running. Evelyn awoke before sunrise. The canyon bathed in a pale, quiet light that filtered through the high red walls. The fire from the previous night had long since burned down to embers, and the world felt impossibly still. For a moment, she allowed herself to linger in that stillness, breathing in the clean desert air, feeling the strength of muscles that hadn't moved this slowly or freely in years. She wanted to believe she had escaped her past entirely, that Coda's presence was a shield she could lean against, that she could finally forget the relentless fear that had dominated her life. But some things could not be hidden. Even here, she thought of her uncle, the man who had controlled everything about her life. The very memory of him made her skin crawl. He had been a master of intimidation, a shadow that followed her from childhood to adulthood, crushing hope before it had a chance to bloom. He had arranged every engagement, monitored every movement, and punished every whisper of independence with harsh words and worse. He had told her she was fragile, incapable, too delicate to make decisions for herself. And over the years, she had believed him. The memory of the wedding that morning made her chest tighten. She could still feel the cold metal of the church pew under her fingers, the suffocating weight of her dress, the chorus of polite smiles that had seemed to mock her very being. And she remembered the last words her uncle had spoken before she fled. "No one protects you like I do. You will obey or you will regret it." Even now, alone in the canyon, those words echoed inside her. She had run from him physically, but the fear he instilled lingered like a phantom, whispering that danger was everywhere and that she had no right to exist freely. Coda's voice interrupted the spiral of memories, calm and patient. "You can tell me," he said gently, appearing from the shadows behind the fire. "Whatever it is, I can hear it." Evelyn flinched, startled by how easily he seemed to understand. She had been so accustomed to hiding, to holding her secrets tightly because exposure meant punishment, humiliation, or worse. She had always lived with the knowledge that vulnerability was dangerous. Yet here, In the quiet safety of the canyon, she felt the strange pull of trust. I can't explain everything," she said, her voice trembling. "But my uncle, he will never let me live my life. He controls everything. She trailed off, the words too painful, too raw. Tears gathered at the corners of her eyes, and she looked away, ashamed of the cracks showing in her armor. Coda knelt beside her, still at a respectful distance, his gaze steady. "You don't have to explain more than you want," he said softly. "I don't need to know every detail to protect you. I only need to know that someone is threatening you, and that you need a place to be safe." Evelyn's hands clenched in her lap. She had lived her entire life convinced that no one could be trusted, that even the kindest of words carried hidden motives. And yet, Coda's presence was different. He did not question her, he did not judge her, he did not demand anything from her in return. The very idea that someone could offer protection without conditions was foreign, almost dizzying. Her lips quivered, and she finally whispered the secret she had carried alone for so long. He will find me. He always does. And if he does, I don't know if I can survive it." Coda's jaw tightened, a quiet intensity in his eyes. "Then I promise you, no one will harm you while I am here," he said, his voice firm but not harsh. "You will not face him alone. I will not let him take you back. You are not weak. You are not fragile. You are stronger than you know, and I will help you see that strength in yourself." The weight of his words settled over her like a blanket. For the first time in her life, Evelyn allowed herself to imagine a life in which fear did not dominate every choice. A life in which someone else could stand beside her, not above her, and fight for her safety. She did not speak for several minutes, simply letting the words sink in, letting the tension in her shoulders release just slightly. Coda remained there, silent, patient, offering the presence of protection without pressure, without expectation. Simply a quiet declaration that she did not have to face her past alone. When she finally looked up at him, her eyes glimmered with a mixture of fear, relief, and something else, a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, she could survive her past and begin to trust again. Coda nodded almost imperceptibly, sensing the shift in her. "We'll stay here until you are ready," he said. "And when the time comes, you will face him. But you will not face him alone." For the first time, Evelyn believed it. She was not completely safe yet. The past still. Days in the canyon settled into a rhythm that was both strange and comforting for Evelyn. The sun rose and fell over the red cliffs, casting shadows that moved like quiet guardians around her. Coda's presence was steady and unwavering, a constant that felt almost unnatural to someone who had spent a lifetime running from every certainty. He never forced her to speak, never commanded her to do anything, and never expected her to hurry through the process of trusting him. In his patience, she began to notice herself changing, if only in small ways. The first moments of change came quietly. Coda showed her how to move through the desert with care, how to watch the signs of weather, the tracks of animals, and the hidden dangers of the land. At first, she was clumsy, fearful of making a mistake, but his calm guidance never came with impatience or criticism. Instead, he watched her with a steady gaze, offering a nod when she succeeded and a gentle instruction when she faltered. Each small triumph gave her a little more confidence, a little more sense that she could survive on her own terms. He taught her to ride more than the first day's tense journey. He showed her how to hold the reins correctly, how to feel the rhythm of the horse beneath her, how to trust the animal as much as she trusted him. Evelyn's fear of falling gradually loosened its grip. She began to enjoy the sensation of speed, the wind tearing through her hair, the canyon walls blurring past in streaks of red and gold. In those moments, she felt freedom like she had never imagined it. a sensation that had been denied her since childhood. Fishing by the stream was another lesson in patience and observation. Coda guided her hands as she learned to bait the hook and cast it into the water, but he never took control. Every catch she made was entirely hers, and the pride that swelled in her chest surprised her. She realized she had never experienced genuine accomplishment without someone else claiming it as their own. For the first time, her successes were hers to own, but the lessons were not only practical. Coda's care extended beyond survival. He shared stories of his people, of the land, of the quiet courage that lived in small, everyday acts. He spoke of honor, resilience, and the strength found in gentleness as easily as he spoke of hunting or tracking. Evelyn listened with fascination, absorbing each word, each story, each gesture of respect for life and self. Slowly, the barrier she had built around herself began to erode. The fear that had dominated every corner of her being had no place here. In its place was curiosity, respect, and the tentative stirrings of trust. The most disorienting part was the way she began to notice Coda himself. The warmth of his voice when he spoke calmly, the strength in his hands when he guided her or helped her with a difficult task, the quiet steadiness of his presence that made the desert feel less threatening. She caught herself glancing at him when she thought he wasn't looking, wondering at the depth of patience and care he offered without question. And when he smiled, a small, easy curl of lips that seemed to reach his eyes, she felt a flutter in her chest she hadn't experienced in years. Not even in the fleeting glances of polite suitors she had fled from. Evelyn tried to suppress it, tried to remind herself that her feelings could be dangerous, that trust and attraction made one vulnerable. But Coda's eyes often found hers steady and unwavering, and in them she saw no expectation, no desire to control, only a patient acknowledgement of her being. Slowly, she allowed herself to imagine being close to him in ways she hadn't allowed herself to imagine with anyone else, not as a possession, not as a responsibility, but as a partnership. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the canyon walls, painting the sky in shades of orange and violet, Coda handed her a freshly caught fish and gestured toward the small fire. "You've done well today," he said simply. Evelyn's chest swelled with an unfamiliar warmth. She wanted to say something profound, something that conveyed the gratitude and trust growing inside her, but words faltered. Instead, she nodded, a small, genuine smile spreading across her face. It was the first smile in years that didn't carry fear, worry, or hesitation in that quiet canyon. With the sun dipping low and the fire crackling, Evelyn realized that she was beginning to feel something remarkable. Safety, not imposed, but earned. Strength, not forced, but nurtured. And most dangerously beautiful of all, a connection to someone who saw her not as fragile, but as whole. Coda's presence had become more than protection. It had become the anchor she had been searching for her entire life. The first proof that trust was not a weakness, and that love, gentle, patient, unwavering, could exist without fear. Evelyn's past, with all its terror and control, still loomed. But with Coda, she felt for the first time that maybe she didn't have to face it alone. And in that realization, something inside her shifted irrevocably. A fear that had once defined her began to loosen, replaced by the faint, startling possibility of hope that the peace of the canyon could not last forever. Evelyn had begun to feel a fragile sense of freedom, a belief that for the first time in her life she could choose how to live. But even in the quiet desert, the shadows of her past were patient and relentless. One morning, as the sun rose and painted the canyon walls with soft pinks and golds, the distant sound of hooves shattered the fragile calm. Evelyn froze, her pulse spiking as the memories of running, hiding, and endless fear came rushing back. She had thought she had escaped, But the pounding rhythm of the approaching horses carried a familiar terror, the return of the men her uncle had sent. Determined to drag her back into a life she had fled, Coda noticed the change immediately. His posture stiffened, and his eyes narrowed as he scanned the horizon. There was no hesitation in his movements, no questioning whether he should act. Evelyn's fear threatened to spiral, but he reached out, his hand firm on her shoulder. "Do not run," he said, his voice steady, commanding, yet calm. "Not this time. You are not alone." She wanted to flee. Her instinct was to vanish into the cliffs, to run until her legs could carry her no further. But Coda's presence anchored her. His eyes, unyielding and protective, gave her the strength to face the threat instead of fleeing blindly into danger. "They're coming for me," she whispered, the panic in her voice sharp and urgent. "They will take me back. They always do." "They will not," Coda said firmly. "I will not allow it." Evelyn's stomach churned. The words sounded impossible. Could anyone truly stand against the reach of her uncle and the hired men who obeyed him without question? Coda's gaze met hers, unwavering, filled with a quiet confidence she wanted desperately to believe. And for the first time, she did not doubt him. The riders drew closer, dust rising in plumes behind them. Evelyn could make out their shapes now, the men in dark leather, their expressions hardened with the certainty of capture. Her legs shook, but Coda moved in front of her, a living shield between her and the approaching threat. His stance was wide, his posture firm, radiating the calm authority of someone who had faced danger before and refused to back down. "Stay behind me," he commanded. "Do not move until I tell you." Evelyn's chest tightened, but she obeyed. Her heart raced and her hands trembled, yet something in Coda's unwavering stance filled her with a courage she had never known. He did not raise a weapon yet, did not attack preemptively, but the sheer confidence in his presence seemed to create a barrier. The men slowed as they approached the canyon entrance, scanning the narrow path. Unsure of the hidden figure blocking their way. "They won't take me," she whispered again, barely daring to speak the words aloud. "They will not," Coda repeated. Louder this time, his voice carrying across the canyon like the echo of a mountain. "You are under my protection. Step forward and you will regret it." The tension hung in the air, thick and heavy, the desert wind stirring dust at their feet. The men hesitated, recognizing the resolve in the warrior who blocked their path. Coda's calm strength and the deadly precision in his movements told them that he was not a man to be tested lightly. Evelyn felt a mixture of awe and relief. She had spent her life running, hiding, and fearing the worst at every turn, but Coda's unwavering defense showed her that protection and courage could exist outside of fear. He was not there to punish, not there to control. He was there to stand firm, to make sure she could survive on her own terms. Hours seemed to stretch, the standoff balanced on the edge of danger. The men finally realized that intimidation would not work against someone willing to fight for her freedom. One by one, they turned their horses and retreated, their authority and threats useless against Coda's determination. Evelyn sank to her knees once the dust settled, trembling with relief and disbelief. Coda knelt beside her, not pressing her, not speaking judgment, only holding her in his presence. "You see?" he said softly. "You do not have to face them alone." Tears sprang to her eyes, a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and gratitude. For the first time, Evelyn understood the meaning of safety not as something given, but as something protected fiercely, with courage and steadfastness. She had run from life for so long, terrified of every shadow, every man, every command. But Coda had shown her that strength could stand between her and fear, that trust could be built without coercion, and that love could exist without control. And in that moment, she realized something even more profound. She was beginning to believe in herself again, in her right to X. The canyon returned to its quiet after the threat of her uncle's men faded, leaving behind the scorched dust and the echo of hooves in the distance. Evelyn sat on a sun-warmed rock, her fingers tracing the edges of the fire pit from the night before, her thoughts tangled between fear, relief, and something that felt dangerously close to hope. For the first time, she had seen someone fight for her without expectation, without ownership, and the truth settled in her chest like a stone she could no longer ignore. She did not have to be controlled anymore. The past, with its endless rules and suffocating fear, still lingered. Every memory of her uncle's dominance, every calculated punishment, and every whispered warning of what would happen if she disobeyed pressed on her mind. Running had been her only defense for years, the one thing that allowed her to breathe. Yet now, staring at the canyon walls and listening to the distant call of birds, she realized running was no longer the only option. Coda watched her quietly, giving her space as he often did. He had always allowed her to make her own choices, guiding without coercion, protecting without possession. He understood her fear, but he had also shown her the possibility of strength. And now he waited for her decision, patient as the desert itself. Evelyn's mind wandered to the alternative, a life spent always running, always looking over her shoulder, never daring to trust anyone, never daring to live freely. The thought made her chest ache. Could she return to that life? Could she go back to being a shadow of herself, obeying orders and living in constant terror? She knew the answer before she even tried. No. She would rather face fear head-on than surrender to it again. Her gaze met Coda's, steady and unwavering, and something shifted within her. In his eyes, she saw not judgment, not command, but belief that she was capable, that she was strong, that she deserved freedom. She felt a trembling courage rise inside her, fragile but real, and she realized that the decision had been hers all along. "I don't want to run anymore," she whispered, her voice catching. "I don't want to hide." Coda's expression softened, a small, approving nod acknowledging her words without pressing her further. "Then you don't have to," he said. "You will not face the world alone." Evelyn's chest tightened, and for the first time in years, she felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration. Standing still, choosing to confront life with someone at her side, felt far scarier than running had ever been, but also far more alive. She understood that trusting Coda did not mean giving up her autonomy. It meant reclaiming it. It meant choosing to face danger, uncertainty, and her own past with courage. The sun climbed higher, bathing the canyon in light. Evelyn felt the warmth on her skin as if it were a promise, a silent affirmation that life could be gentle even when it had once been cruel. She thought of her uncle, of the countless moments when she had been told she was weak and powerless. And now, with Coda standing beside her, she realized the truth: she had never been powerless. She had survived every threat, every manipulation, every fear, because she had the will to keep moving. And now she would survive not by fleeing, but by standing firmly, supported by someone who respected her strength. Her heart beat faster as she made the final choice, the one that would define the rest of her life. She would no longer let fear dictate her path. She would no longer allow herself to be a prisoner of the past. She would stay, not because she needed protection, but because she wanted to live, fully, freely, and with the person who had proven that love could be a shield, not a cage. "I choose to stay," she said, louder this time, her voice carrying across the canyon. "I choose my life. I choose." U.S. Coda's eyes softened with something unspoken, a mixture of pride, relief, and quiet joy. He stepped closer, his presence solid and unwavering, not to dominate or control, but to stand as a steadfast ally. "Then we face it together," he said, his voice calm but certain. Evelyn exhaled, a weight lifting from her chest, and for the first time, she felt the possibility of a future she had never dared to imagine. A future in which she was no longer running, no longer hiding, and no longer alone. A future where she could choose, for herself, who she would be and who she would love. The canyon seemed to embrace her choice, the wind whispering through the cliffs as if acknowledging her courage. Evelyn Hart, once the frightened bride who had run her life to escape fear, now stood at the threshold of freedom, ready to claim a future defined not by terror, but by strength, trust, and love. And in that moment, she knew she would never run again. The canyon was quiet once more. The tension of the chase and the confrontation with her uncle's men finally behind them. Evelyn stood at the edge of the stream, the water glinting in the morning sun, her hands loosely resting at her sides. She felt a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration, the weight of fear finally lifting, replaced by something she had thought impossible: peace. For years she had run from life, from men, from authority, from herself. But now, with Coda standing silently nearby, she realized that fear no longer dictated her existence. Coda approached slowly, the sun casting long shadows across the canyon walls. His presence was steady, unwavering, like the very cliffs that surrounded them. Evelyn looked at him, searching for any hint of doubt or judgment, and found none. Only a calm, firm assurance that she had never experienced in her life. "You're safe with me," he said again, the words as gentle and powerful as the first time he had spoken them. "Not for a day, not for a week, but always. You do not have to fear anymore." Evelyn's throat tightened, her pulse racing. Those 4 words carried more meaning than anything anyone had ever said to her. No one had ever promised protection without control, love without expectation, or safety without conditions. She felt the depth of the promise in his gaze, the unwavering strength behind it. Tears pricked her eyes, but they were not tears of fear. They were tears of relief, of recognition, of gratitude for a life she had never dared to imagine. For the first time, she allowed herself to breathe fully, letting go of the tension that had gripped her for decades. She realized that trust was not weakness, and that love could exist without domination. Coda stepped closer and extended his hand, not demanding, not claiming, but inviting. Evelyn took it with a tentative grip, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. In that touch, she felt a connection that went beyond words, beyond fear, beyond the traumas that had shaped her entire life. It was a bond forged in patience, respect, and unwavering protection. I don't know what to say," she whispered, her voice trembling but steady. "Then don't say anything," Coda replied softly. "Just know that you do not have to face the world alone. Not ever again." Evelyn's heart swelled. For so long she had believed she had no right to choose her own path, no right to claim happiness or safety. But now, standing beside Coda, she understood that she was allowed to exist freely, to make decisions for herself, and to embrace a life she had once thought impossible. She had survived every threat, every manipulation, every fear, and now she could live. The desert around them seemed to echo her newfound freedom. The canyon walls rose like guardians, the wind whispered through the cliffs, and the stream sparkled as if celebrating her courage. She realized that Coda had given her more than safety. He had given her the chance to reclaim herself, to stand still and face life with strength, rather than run from it. "Thank you," she said finally, her voice filled with emotion, "for not letting me run forever, for showing me that I can be safe and that I can choose my own life." Coda's eyes softened, a quiet smile touching his lips. "You never needed saving from the world," he said. "You needed someone to remind you of the strength you already had. And now you can live in it." Evelyn exhaled slowly, letting the words sink in. She had run her entire life, hiding from fear and authority, believing that control was the only way to survive. But now, with Coda standing firm beside her, she understood that strength could be gentle, courage could be shared, and trust could be unconditional. She leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his body and the steady heartbeat that mirrored her own. She no longer flinched from closeness, no longer feared attachment. For the first time, she allowed herself to belong somewhere, to someone, not as a possession, but as a whole, free person. The canyon held its quiet, sacred as if recognizing her transformation. Evelyn Hart, the frightened bride who had run her life for so long, was no longer running. She was alive, she was free, and she was safe. "You're safe with me," Coda repeated, softer now, almost a whisper. "Always." Evelyn closed her eyes, letting the weight of those words settle deep into her chest. For the first time in her life, she believed them. For the first time, she believed in safety, in love, and in a future she could shape for herself. The sun rose higher, the stream shimmered, and the canyon seemed to embrace them both. And for the first time in decades, Evelyn Hart felt entirely, irrevocably, and wonderfully safe.